About a month ago, I replaced two really good MIDI controllers on my desk with this one, thinking that I'm just testing it, but I don't think that I'm going back to those two. Let's talk about it. This is the Novation FL Key Mini, the only keyboard made specifically for FL Studio. In this video, I'm going to discuss everything about it, including the build quality, the features, my experience with it, and answer the most important question. Is it worth it? We've gotten to a point where unboxing anything is hardly a surprise. You get the keyboard itself, a USB-A to B cable, and some documentation. This particular keyboard was provided to me by Novation and Rocket Distribution, but I'm not getting paid to make this video, and anything that I say about it is my own opinion. The build quality is solid. I'm not gonna waste time talking about it. It's from a reputable company, so it's sturdy. You don't need to worry about that. The keys are exactly what you would expect from a mini MIDI controller. It has 25 keys, which is 2 octaves, so you're not gonna be using this to play complex chords. Even playing a chord and its bass note at the same time is a bit challenging. The way that I use it is to play melodies and simple chords, or to sample sounds as I move through different presets. The keys on this also feel slightly softer than my previous keyboard. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. I think that only people that play the piano would know. Let me know in the comments. But if you do want to play complex chords or just want a bigger controller, Novation does make the same keyboard in different sizes. There's the FLkey 37, 49, and 61. I'll have them linked below along with the Mini, which is the one that I have here. From the left of the controller, there are touch-sensitive pitch and modulation controls, a shift, transpose, and octave switching buttons, and then on top there are 8 rotary controls and 16 pads right under them. Channel rack up and down on the right, transport controls, which are the play and record buttons, and then scale and note repeat, which is pretty neat. Every button on this controller becomes what is written under or above it when you press the shift button. So shift plus the first pad puts it into channel rack mode. This takes every single sample and instrument and lays it out on the pads. When this mode is activated, the keys play the last sample or instrument that you activated using the pads. So if you hit a snare on the pads, the keys will play different notes of it, and if you hit something else, same thing happens with that sound. Shift plus the second pad is instrument mode. This is when the pads are an extension of the keyboard. And then the channel rack up and down buttons switch between the instruments without having to touch your mouse and keyboard. If you have an instance of FPC, then it automatically sets it for you and you can finger drum if that's something you're into. Third pad puts it into sequencer mode and you can sequence drums on FL, the same way that you would when using your mouse and keyboard. And then the last 4 pads are for controlling the behavior of the knobs here on top. So you can change the volume and pan of anything in your project using these. If you press the scale button, you can then select what key and mode you want to be in by pressing shift and the relevant key as labeled right above them. This makes it so that any key that you press on this keyboard is in the scale that you selected, making it impossible to play any wrong notes. It's an easy way to come up with melodies even if you don't know music theory, which is kind of dope. I mentioned earlier that I replaced 2 MIDI controllers with this one, and those are the FLkey Fire, which is another controller made for FL Studio, but it is not a keyboard, and then alongside it I have the FLkey MPK Mini. And there are 2 reasons why I wanted to switch to the Novation. Number 1, I wanted a more clean and minimal setup, which I've found to be way more complex than just removing stuff on your desk, but I think I'm gonna get there. And then the second reason is that I felt like the Novation was taking the 2 controllers that I had and fusing them into one and taking the best parts of each while leaving the stuff that I didn't really need. In my review of the FLkey Fire, I mentioned that ultimately it's not worth it and that the most useful buttons were the transport controls. You know, play, pause, stop, etc. The Novation has those and they too are plug and play. You don't need to configure anything. The Fire also had the ability to use the pads for sequencing, finger drumming, and sampling, but they're not velocity sensitive. This one has all those things and the pads are velocity sensitive, like the FLkey MPK Mini, but unlike the FLkey, it has 16 pads instead of 8 and there are RGB to match the color of the instrument and samples in your project. The Novation has transport controls which the FLkey does not have, but unfortunately the Novation does not have a screen, but to me honestly I've never found it to be useful. I mean, it's this size and it can only display like 2 words, and while you're using it there's a computer right in front of you, so I don't get why you'd want to use that screen when there's a giant computer right in front of you. But again, that's just me. If it's useful to you, then that's something to think about. But I think you're getting the idea that this is a combination of those two controllers, and it just makes sense for me. By the way, if you're new to this channel, my name is Tozy and I make videos about music production, DJing, and the tech involved. If that's something you're into, please consider subscribing. Now, nothing is perfect. There are things that I wish were different about this keyboard. The pitch control, although very cool, it's a little bit hard to work with, because when using it, your finger has to land right in the middle and then you can move it up and down. But if it doesn't, it sounds like you switched and played an entirely different note. So you kind of have to look at your finger and where you're putting it when using the pitch control. But otherwise, normal wheels would have been nice to see here, like the Novation FL 37 and the bigger ones. The pads on this are also on the small side, which can make it easy to trigger the wrong sound, but it's not a problem for me. My biggest gripe is that the rotary controls are not endless. This means that you can only use one knob to adjust one thing, because if you use it for multiple things, then the values just jump around. And this can be a deal breaker for some users. But I believe that it makes up for it with the software that it comes with, which is a lot, including a 6-month license for FL Studio Producer Edition, addictive keys, expressive strings by Spitfire Audio, and more, which all cost more than the keyboard itself. I'll have a link in the description with all the included software if you want to check it out. So, is the Novation FL Key Mini worth it? Well, if you're using FL Studio and you don't have a controller, it doesn't make sense to buy anything that is not this. It's gonna give you the best possible experience with your DAW, so yes, it is worth it, 100%. And if you do have a controller and you're thinking of buying something that's more compatible with FL Studio, then this is the one for you. It's 100% worth it from whatever angle that you look at it. To watch my review of the Akai Fire, which is another controller that's made for FL Studio, click here and I'll see you there. Peace.